All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into one of the most mind-bending, deeply personal subjects in all of philosophy, existentialism. We're going to explore how we actually go about finding meaning when the universe itself seems, well, completely indifferent to us even being here. It's a philosophical journey that really forces us to look in the mirror and ask the absolute heaviest questions about who we are.
So, let's start with a massive question right off the bat. What actually gives your life meaning? Is it your career? Is it love, money, or maybe your religion? Or honestly, maybe it's just something simpler, like playing soccer on the weekend or spending hours on a favorite hobby. Whatever it happens to be, we all desperately crave that profound sense of meaning. We pour so much time, energy, and let's be real, a whole lot of anxiety into finding it, just hoping something out there validates our existence.
But here's the roadblock we all eventually hit. As the saying goes, in each man's chest, a tiny ferret of fear gnaws away. Unlike other animals, we humans are painfully aware of our own mortality. If you really stop and think about it, if you let the noise of everyday life just fade for a second, you realize we're basically just momentary microbes on a speck of dust spinning through this unimaginably huge universe. That terrifying realization that the cosmos might not care about our daily struggles at all, yeah, that can easily lead to a numbing sense of futility, or what some thinkers call a life of quiet desperation.
To understand how we deal with this, we actually need to rewind for a second and look at how this problem evolved historically. For thousands of years, humanity had a pretty solid philosophical safety net. Back in ancient Greece, brilliant minds like Plato and Aristotle gave us this highly structured worldview where literally everything had a pre-designed purpose. But fast forward to the late 19th century, and thinkers like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard started aggressively chipping away at that certainty. Then, the mid-20th century hit. After the unimaginable, catastrophic horrors of World War II and the Holocaust, that comforting idea of a naturally ordered, meaningful world, it completely shattered for millions of people. When deliberate atrocities on that scale happened, prepackaged meaning became incredibly hard to find. We needed a totally new way of thinking.
To really get the massive shift that existentialism brought to the world, we have to understand the old default it was rebelling against. That old worldview is called essentialism. Simply put, it's the belief that a core set of properties, or a predetermined purpose, is already inside us before we're even born. Under this highly traditional view, being a good human just meant playing the specific part that God or nature had already assigned to you. In a way, it was super comforting. You didn't have to agonize over your ultimate purpose because the script was already written, and all you had to do was follow it.
Okay, think of an everyday object, like a penknife. The essence of that knife, its intricate design, the folding blade, the whole idea of it being meant to cut things, that all existed in a maker's mind way before the physical knife was ever manufactured in a factory. For the knife, its essence precedes its existence. Its purpose is locked in before it's even real. But the famous French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre argued that for human beings, it is the exact opposite. We are born first. We arrive in this chaotic world without any hardwired design and without any cosmic job description whatsoever.
And that brings us to the absolute foundational tenet of the entire existentialist movement. Existence precedes essence. Think about how radical, how earth-shattering that idea was at the time. It means your birth happens first, and then the canvas is completely, terrifyingly blank. It is entirely up to you and me to write our own essence through the actions we take and the choices we make every single day. There's no set path to walk down, no fixed human nature to fall back on, and absolutely no universal script. We are the authors of our own being.
So, what happens when creatures who are literally wired to seek meaning are dropped into a universe that firmly refuses to give any? We run headfirst into a core concept known as the absurd. Now, in everyday language, we might casually use absurd to mean a silly joke or a laughable situation. But for existentialists, it is a highly technical, deeply painful reality. The absurd is that profound tragedy of crying out into the vast, empty wilderness for a purpose, getting absolutely zero response from a cold, indifferent cosmos, and yet, because it's human nature, continuing to cry out anyway.
Because of this absurd reality, Sartre believed we actually carry an incredibly heavy burden. He famously declared that we are condemned to be free. Now, normally, freedom sounds awesome, right? We all want it. But Sartre meant we are painfully, shockingly free. Without cosmic rules, guaranteed justice, or absolute moral guidelines to lean on, we are entirely on our own to invent a morality to live by. This terrifying abundance of choice causes deep psychological anguish, and the weight of it is staggering, because every sincere choice you make basically fashions a picture of what you believe humanity as a whole should be. Everyone is watching, and there is simply no escape from that responsibility.
That intense psychological anguish is so overwhelming that a lot of us naturally try to run away from it. And that leads to the very real trap of bad faith. Bad faith is when you refuse to accept the absurd by pretending some external authority gives your life meaning. It's burying your head in the sand. You just phone it in, blindly following the path rigidly set by your teachers, your government, or your religion, pretending they have all the final absolute answers. It's a comforting lie we tell ourselves to dodge the terror of ultimate freedom. But Sartre relentlessly warned that these authorities are just flawed people like you who had to figure it out for themselves. Deferring to them means you are surrendering your own authentic existence.
Let's ground this in a fascinating, heartbreaking, real-world example from Sartre himself. Picture the agonizing dilemma of one of his actual students during the brutal occupation of France in World War II. This young man was at a massive, life-altering crossroads. Option A, he could go off to war and fight for a grand cause he deeply believed in, liberating his country. But he'd have to leave his lonely, elderly mother behind, knowing he might never see her again. Option B, he could stay home, care for the mother who relied completely on him, and make an enormous, tangible difference to one single person, but let others fight and die for justice on his behalf. He had a profound moral duty to both. So he goes to Sartre looking for an answer, hoping a moral theory or a wise authority figure would just tell him the definitively right thing to do.
And Sartre's famous advice? There is no answer until you choose one for yourself. Sartre told his student that no one else's advice could possibly lead him to an authentic decision. No ethical framework or religious doctrine could mathematically weigh his mother against his country. He just had to accept the full, crushing weight of his radical freedom. The young man's choice, no matter which path he ultimately took, would be the right choice, provided he made it authentically, fully owning the values he was deciding to prioritize in a completely chaotic world.
Now, it's vital to recognize that existentialism isn't just a monolith of gloomy guys smoking cigarettes in Parisian cafes. It is a highly varied and robust philosophy. While Sartre focused intensely on absolute radical freedom, his brilliant partner Simone de Beauvoir pointed out that reality isn't always that simple. She masterfully argued that deeply ingrained societal structures and historical barriers often conspire to hold women back from fully exercising that freedom. Then you have Søren Kierkegaard, a 19th century Dane who was actually a devout Christian, proving existentialists certainly aren't all atheists. He believed the sheer dread of existence meant you had to take a bold, non-rational leap of faith toward God. And then there's Albert Camus, who believed that rather than despair, we can actually accept this completely absurd world cheerfully.
To illustrate this cheerful acceptance, Camus retold the classical myth of Sisyphus. This is the guy condemned by the gods to push a massive, heavy rock up a steep hill for all of eternity, only to watch it roll right back down to the bottom every single time he reaches the top. Talk about the ultimate picture of utter futility. There is no progress, no final victory. But Camus powerfully argued that, just like Sisyphus, even if our daily tasks lack some grand cosmic purpose, our job is to fiercely own that struggle. We must imagine Sisyphus happy. We have to cheerfully embrace the raw experience of living, rebelling against the absurdity of the universe simply by finding true joy in the push itself.
Yes, the universe might be inherently indifferent to our existence. Yes, our time here might seem like nothing more than a brief flash in the dark of deep space. But consider this incredible thought. However vast the darkness, we must supply our own light. Existentialism might sound a bit bleak when you first hear about the lack of predetermined meaning, but honestly, it is profoundly radically empowering. Because the world is devoid of inherent purpose, you get to imbue it with whatever purpose you want. If there is going to be justice, order, meaning, or love in this vast universe, we are the ones who get to put it there. We are the creators of the light. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and I want to leave you with a direct, deeply personal challenge. How will you choose to write your own essence today? Remember, existence precedes essence. You are entirely, beautifully responsible for the person you become. It's time to step out of bad faith. Stop waiting for the universe to hand you a predefined purpose on a silver platter, and take radical responsibility for creating your own meaning. Thanks so much for exploring these incredible ideas with me, and I hope this empowers you as you go out and shape your own authentic life.